And there we have it. Welcome to session number 3 of Genesis in Depth, a study of just about everything that I can figure out a way to teach in the book of Genesis. Genesis lays the foundations for all of the rest of biblical theology, and so it's really helpful to have a sound foundation here. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined here today by my friends in Italy, the Philippines, and here in a variety of places in the US. And I know that during any given week, YouTube and Facebook visitors amount to quite a few other places. So it's good to see everyone. Thank you for coming. Uh, we're uh, we're just getting started. So I've done an introductory session where we talked about some of the critical issues and some of the background issues. Last week, I introduced the first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's a profound reality there that cannot be any other way. The universe undoubtedly exists, and yet it is finite and might not exist. So the fundamental philosophical question, what we call an existential question, is why is there something rather than nothing at all? Uh, and the secular world can give no reasonable answer. Is oh, it just happened. It doesn't answer the question. What is the mechanism by which it happened? Uh, by the nature of the thing, the only intelligent life form who could give us an answer to the question of why there is something rather than nothing at all is the supreme being who created. There's no other source of that information. Trying to uh, make up some other construct, the eternality of matter, for example, doesn't work. Or the evolution of space and time and material and energy and all living things and the enormous complexity of life out of nothing is literally impossible, not just logically unlikely, but literally impossible. There has to be a cause. And that first cause himself must be uh, adequate to account for the effect. He must be outside of the effect. That is, the material universe must have an immaterial cause, a spiritual cause. There, there is no other logical way of explaining this. Even Plato, 2,500 years ago, saw this. He didn't have much of the language that we have today to discuss it, but he understood that uh, the universe that he saw need not exist, but it does, and is therefore caused to exist by another who has to be outside of it. And so, yes, there is a supreme being, and we can argue through all of the rest of that, but at the very beginning, God, there has to be. Uh, Created means to create out of nothing. Heavens and earth means every material thing that exists, including the space between the material things. Uh, the that that sentence ends with a period, and of course we take that for granted in English, but it's not taken for granted in Hebrew. The accents of the verse end it there. Uh, and so we end verse 1 of Genesis with a completely created universe. And at that time, all of the logical, the empirical laws of nature, as we call them, were in existence. It was all there. And that knowledge, that foundation takes us into verse 2. Verse 2 follows immediately from verse 1. It continues with what we call a vav consecutive. There's a little Hebrew jargon there. The vav is the and. That doesn't come up in a lot of our translations, but it should, because verses 1 and 2 are directly connected. Those who want to make a gap or a logical disjunction between verses 1 and 2 have to explain why the and is there. We translate that, now the earth was formless and void. Let's go into that, and we'll talk about just exactly what we're seeing in verse 2 of Genesis chapter 1. Let's see if I can get the equipment to cooperate. Okay, here we are. The text itself tells us that the earth was formless and void, or without form and void. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God brooded over the waters, or some say moved over the surface of the waters. Okay, so we've got three separate things going here that are important to understand. This is the description of the earth in the moments following the initial creation. God has created everything there is, but it is without form and void. The Hebrew is fairly famous, and a lot of people have made notes about these two words. The Hebrew is tohu vavohu. Tohu and vohu sound kind of like each other, and there's kind of a poetic rhythm to them. Tohu means formless or unshaped. And void, vohu, means empty, unpopulated, unfilled. Okay, so no particular form to the heavens and the earth, and no particular content. Okay, the materials are there. I believe at the time of the initial creation, the atomic elements, the table of elements that we learn in school, was all in place. It was what it was supposed to be. But there was no particular shape to anything. In the 6 days of creation, we're going to see a forming and then a filling of the heavens and the earth. And most of that filling is going to take place upon the earth. Kind of an important distinction here. Now, the earth was formless and void. Well, what about the rest of the universe? Well, it was also formless and void. We're going to see the forming of the heavens in verse 4, or in the fourth day. But from verse 2 on through the rest of the Bible, God is going to focus on the events upon the earth, and particularly upon one fairly small section of the earth, the Middle East. So the Bible doesn't spend very much time disposing of the whole heavens, stars and planets and everything that's out there, which is very interesting to us. And I would love to have taken the picture that we have here, but I didn't. I think that was the Apollo 11 group shooting from orbit. But the heavens are beautiful, but God takes uh, all of that and creates it in one go. He just speaks it into being. There it is. And in the fourth day, God will fill the heavens with stars and planets and sun and moon and the rest of it. But at this point, the earth itself is formless, which doesn't mean it wasn't a globe. It had the form of a globe. It had an inner core, no doubt, a mantle over the core, and then the surface rocks. What we normally think of as the lowest level of rock that's accessible to people on the surface of the earth is actually the crust. And the base of the crust of the earth is a mixture of what we call uh, uh, a plutonic rock or volcanic, mostly various kinds of basalt, as in lava rock, or granite, which formed more slowly and developed larger crystals. And the granite and basalt form what geologists call basement rock. These rocks uh, were formed uh, with heat. Now, that heat doesn't exist yet. In verse 2, the earth was formless, tohu, and it was void, vohu. There's nothing there, no animals, no plants, no rocks, no mountains, no seas, no sky, no wind. It was just there. The darkness was upon the face of the deep. Darkness is interesting because there's no light at all. And without light, there is literally no energy of any kind. There's no heat. There's no. Uh, there may be gravity, but there really shouldn't be. Without light, there is no energy of any kind. There's no X-rays. There's no gamma rays. There's no nuclear power. There's no nothing. There's no magnetic systems yet. The entire universe at this point is dark. We're not going to see the light until verse 3. So here we are, completely dark. Because of that, because there is no light and no energy, the universe was at absolute zero. That's a technical term. It means as cold as anything can possibly get. 0 degrees Kelvin, as I recall. That's about 2,000 degrees below zero on the Fahrenheit scale. But at absolute zero, which is defined as the point at which all molecular movement ceases, nothing moved. It was absolutely as cold as it could possibly get, and there was no energy of any kind, and the universe was dark, completely, utterly dark, not of deep shadow, but utterly dark. And while that was happening, the Spirit of God brooded over the surface of the waters. That's a very interesting phrase. That is a lot of fun to be had with this particular phrase. The Spirit of God is uh, uh, Ruach Elohim. Ruach is like the New Testament term pneuma, and it can be translated breath or even wind, but it's more likely and more usually in the Old Testament translated the Spirit. The Spirit of God, we know from the New Testament, is the third person of the triune God. We're told also in John chapter 1 that Jesus, who is the Word of God, was present and active in the creation. So we see all three, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, present in the creation event itself, and each of them contributing their own thing. We when we look at what each person of the triune God does in the creation, in the governance of the world, in the development of redemption, and the judgment of the world, we learn a great deal about each of them and their individual uh, purposes and outlooks and directions. They work together and in unity, but each has his own role. So here we are with the Spirit of God operating here. And sometimes we translate this moved, sometimes we translate this brooded. The word brooded is kind of fun because it reminds me of a chicken. If you've ever watched a chicken gathering her baby chicks, or while she's still got her eggs, and she just kind of cuddles up over the top of the eggs to keep everything warm. So the Spirit of God is doing this mother hen thing. The Hebrew is a participle, merachephet, from rachaf, and it means to move and to vibrate and to take care of. It's a very good word for what a chicken does with her eggs and her baby chicks. So I like to speak of the mother hen doing this funky chicken dance over the surface of the waters. Now, the Bible calls this waters, Mayim. Mayim just means the oceans, uh, which were at this time completely frozen. And so what we've got here is kind of interesting. The Earth is a globe or close to a globe with this nickel core, a mantle over the top of that where there's going to be heat in time, the crust over the top of that, which is basement rock, and then over the very top of that, water, which is frozen solid. Yeah, that was the initial creation. And then the rest of the universe is completely dark, so there were no stars visible. And I would have to assume that the stars themselves had not been created. Perhaps the material in absolute zero temperatures was just lying there, scattered around, ready to be formed into something. So there's no form yet. It's just the very beginning. So that takes us into the 6 days of creation. And this is beginning in verse 3. So 3 through 25 is a slow walk through the 6 days of creation and a seventh day of rest. Um, and this lays out a kind of logical order for the creation. There's actually there's some poetics involved here. Now, when I say poetics, I don't mean that Genesis 1 is poetry. It certainly isn't. It's definitely prose, and it's meant to be narrative history. But at the same time, Moses is using very careful wording. There's repetition going on. There is an orderliness to the description of the events. This is not off the cuff. Moses, I believe, spent a good deal of time putting this into the form that we see today. The creation is described as ex nihilo, out of nothing. So God created the whole universe out of nothing. And now that he's got this material to work with, he begins speaking the commands of creation. And this process of speaking the form into being and the fullness into being is laid out over 6 days. The critics, of course, don't like that. The secular theories of where the universe came from really, absolutely, positively have to have billions of years. It just is. There's statistically, there's absolutely no possibility for anything to have evolved out of nothing in less than billions and billions of years. And the evolutionary, even if there were a beginning Big Bang, which is unlikely, but if there were, you'd have to explain where the primordial nut came from. It why is there a primordial nut then rather than nothing at all? It's hard to credit the theory, but the secular theory needs billions of years because evolution is so grossly improbable. Creation needs no such room. Creation can happen in an instant. God created the heavens and the earth in an instant, all there. He just spoke it into being, and there it was. The days of creation are laid out over 6 days, more for our understanding of the order of things than from any need of God to spread it out. Like he was getting tired, and so he had to take a nap every night. Nothing like that is suggested. When we look at the 6 days of creation, there's a couple of things that need to be laid out. One is that each day is described as having an evening and having a morning. Okay, even before there was days and lights and sun and moon. There was evening and there was morning the first day. Okay. The Hebrew word for day is yom, Y-O-M. As a very common word in the Old Testament, is a very common word in every language. And the nature of the word means 24 hours roughly. In that day means at that time. And when I mentioned to you that I'll be going to the Philippines. Oh, okay. When are you coming? Well, the 4th day of August is when or something like that. In that day, I'll arrive in Clark Field, and we'll start doing what we do. That's how the term is used. in the Bible, the word yom, day, with a numerical adjective, like on the fourth day, or uh, in that day, or uh, during those 40 days, or on the seventh day. When a word is used like that, it always means 24 hours, or approximately. It always refers to an ordinary, normal, human, earthly day. It never means anything else. Uh, there's no place in the Bible where we've got a numerical adjective referring to an infinite length of time or an extraordinarily long length of time. It never happens. And those who argue otherwise are just, they're playing silly games. Uh, and they need to deal with the facts on the ground. Okay, so 6 days is sometimes called a framework, and there are those who like to take this particular poetic structure as an indication that Genesis isn't really history. I I beg to differ. Uh, it's laid out in this way for some very specific reasons. Uh, and Look at days 1, 2, and 3. On day 1, we're going to see the creation of light. Day 2, we're going to see the creation of a firmament or an expanse, which is something like the skies, which will separate the earth below from the heavens above. Interesting. Sky, sea, uh, and a firmament in between. And it's in this firmament that um, later on we're going to see birds flying. Okay, and in the seas we'll see fish swimming, but it doesn't happen yet. And on day 1, there is light created. On day 4, the light bearers are created, the sun, the moon, the stars, planets for that matter. Uh, they didn't exist on day 1. So people ask, well, where did the light come from? This is assuming that the light has to come from a light source. And indeed it does. And the Bible tells us where that is. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all, in one of John's epistles. So light bearers, the firmament, and then fish and birds, just where they belong. On day 3, the dry land appears, and also plants covering the earth. On day 6, mammals, land animals, and finally man. Then the seventh day is set apart from the other 6 as a day for rest. God rested. Now, that doesn't mean that God was tired. It means that he's setting up a pattern for us, a 7-day week. So the 7-day week with 1 day set apart for rest is later on in the Bible going to be explained in more detail. But for this time, it's simply the pattern of the creation. And God set it apart into 6 days of working on the creation and 1 day of rest specifically for us. This is the Sabbath rest. The Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath, as Jesus said. So that framework is often helpful to understand the order of things. As we get out of verse 2, let's go on directly into verse 3. I spotted this and I thought, okay, I've got to use this. There's got to be some way to use this. And God said, this whole page of calculus, and there was light. Now, what God actually said was, let there be light. God said, let there be light, and there was light. Let me say this in Hebrew, and I'll explain what I'm saying as I say it. I know the stuff on the screen there may as well be Hebrew. I got it. Uh, that and God said, comes out in Hebrew, Vayomer Elohim. Okay, the word Vayomer and he said is the normal introduction to an ordinary narrative statement. It's like a pair of quotation marks. There's no emphasis. When the Bible wants to say that someone was very excited or they were speaking loudly or they were angry, there are other words. When the Bible wants to give emphasis, there are lots of other words. When somebody simply says something with no particular emphasis, which is the way the word is used most of the time in the whole Bible, the term Vayomer is used. And he said, okay, what did he say? Quote, let there be light. The Hebrew is Yahi, or is light. Let there be is the three-letter word, Yahi, from Haya, to be. Yahi is the word of command. It's an imperative. It says, let there be light. And light is energy itself. The equations that we use to describe light also describe radio waves, sound waves, gravity, heat, magnetism, all kinds of stuff. Anything that is energy, all the way from sound waves to nuclear energy, use the same equations because the energy is the thing that they all have in common. Energy is at its root the movement of atoms. We can't even see that. And yet that's what energy is. When God said, let there be light, he was bringing energy into being according to a rather vast set of physical equations. The fundamental laws of physics were being obeyed when God said, let there be light. God didn't create the laws of physics. The laws of physics are a reflection of the character of God himself and could not be anything other than what they are. When we humorously tell our granddaughter gravity works when she's about to dump something off her spoon, we're telling her that there are some fundamental laws of nature. Gravity is going to work every time you try it. And if you don't want your corn to fall off onto the table, you need to keep it level all the way to your mouth. That's a law of physics that works every time we try. Light is the same thing. There's a great deal we don't understand about light. Is it a wave? Well, most of the time. Is it particles? Yes, it actually kind of behaves like particles. Light appears to bend in response to gravitational force. So light has mass somehow. And yet waves don't have mass, even though they work in media with mass. So the two theories are not quite compatible with one another, and the physicists just say there's a mystery here, and sometimes it's helpful to speak of light as a wave, sometimes to speak of it as as particles, and we can see how it works in both of those ways. So they don't really know, but they know how it works. And that creation is not the least bit arbitrary, rather follows precise and very predictable principles. This is why, well, literally, it's why science works. When scientists go out and measure things and observe things in nature, they are observing an orderly universe. If they observe that uh, gravity works at a specific acceleration in, say, Chicago, then they do the same experiment in Manila. They find that gravity works at exactly the same rate in exactly the same way. They're not going to expect it to turn out differently on different days or in different places or at different times of day. It always works the way it works. And this is true about everything. The formula for water, two hydrogen atoms combined with one oxygen atom, is always the way water works. If you come up with different proportions, it doesn't work. That's not water, it's something else. You add a little something else to the mixture, and it isn't water anymore, it's something else. And that's very predictable, and it always works the same way. This is what makes science possible. During the Middle Ages, uh, actually before the Middle Ages, but during the Middle Ages, Christians are the ones who first began thinking scientifically based on the truth of their observations in nature and based on what they understood about God and about his consistency. God always operates according to the same principles because those principles are not separate from God and they're not arbitrary. They are, in fact, expressions of the attributes of God Himself. So the equations for light are something that it has taken men hundreds of years to work out and to try to figure out, just carefully observing. But it is observable and it is repeatable because God created light according to laws that are infinite in his own character. Christians believe that nature is not arbitrary, but is rather orderly because it has an orderly creator. Most of the rest of the world's philosophies, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, believes that the universe can be arbitrary, it can be contradictory, it can be illogical. The Christian believes that the universe is logical and it makes good sense because it is made by a sensible God. Muslims actually had a head start in some ways on scientific thinking. They came up with algebra, after all. Although some have argued that they got that from India, which I think is a possibility. And they did some other interesting things. They came up with the astrolabe for navigation. But interestingly, Muslims didn't explore the world. They came up with some very interesting concepts in medicine. But interestingly, Muslims didn't invent modern hospitals and medicine because they didn't expect it to be repeatable. They expected that God would change his mind, that everything is arbitrary. And we Christians believe that the universe is in fact predictable. And if you see a stone drop to the earth, you can make a good guess that maybe that'll happen again. And after a while, you can add some numbers to that and make very precise predictions, so precise that you can send a rocket to the moon and be sure of hitting it because God's laws are plain and observable. So God said, let there be light, and there was light. Yahi or, va, yahi or. Okay, God said, let there be light, and so light was. Light stood at attention, saluted nicely, and came into being. It did exactly what God told it to do. At that moment, there was an a winding up of everything as energy filled the universe. Suddenly, there was light everywhere. There was energy everywhere. The warmth of heat began to fill all the spaces. The water that was over the surface of the earth melted. Right? All of this happened as a result of God's simple, casual command. God said, let there be light. And there was light. Okay, there it was. Uh, let's look at the rest of this. God said, let there be light. There was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness, which is interesting. And I'm not sure quite how he did that. Uh, how do you make the light stop here and the darkness stop there? I don't know. If there's light everywhere, it's a little strange. And the light he called day, the darkness he called night. Okay, somehow this is happening, and there was evening and there was morning, one day. So there at the end of verse 5, we've got the ending of the first day. So let's move on to the second day. During day 2, we're going to see an expanse in heaven. And I should have had some print in there, but I thought this was a good picture of the expanse. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. Okay, a little enigmatic. And so God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below and the expanse, below the expanse, from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. Now, we don't know exactly what an expanse is or a firmament. A firmament is a thing that is firm because it's been stomped on. An expanse is a great big wide area that is flat because it's been stomped on. The most prosaic use of the word expanse in the Bible is of a threshing floor. You get the whole village stomping on a piece of ground. It turns into an expanse. It's like a parking lot, only bigger. Now, what does the word really mean? The simple answer is that we don't know exactly. But it says there is water below. That would be the ocean. One great, huge, primordial ocean. And then far above, clouds. Now, there's all kinds of theories about how the clouds operated in the first week, and there's a lot we don't know. Some argue that there was a vapor canopy over the top of the earth, and that's where the flood eventually came from. That's possible, and I'm willing to entertain that. The bottom is it doesn't really matter very much. The clouds contain roughly the same amount of water as the oceans do. There's a balance between them. As the sunlight comes down on the earth, water is evaporated, it turns into clouds. And the clouds carry all of that water to other places. The clouds blow up over the dry land and so on. But at this point, in day 2, there is no dry land. So you've got the oceans beneath, an expanse above the oceans, and then the clouds up above that. But later on, we're going to see that the expanse also seems to include even more. It includes the stars in the sky. So at that point, because there is now energy, the Earth was beginning to turn. And the water that was below and the water that is above began to respond to gravity and to centripetal and centrifugal force. Because there were no land areas, the igneous rock, the hot rock of the undersurface of the Earth, uh, the basement rock, began to be eroded. And there is a first layer, a first event of erosion during that first day. If the Earth was turning at the same rate that it is today, the friction generated by the waters of the ocean sloshing around the Earth in a Coriolis cycle would have caused a significant amount of sedimentation, erosion. And so we would expect to find, if we were looking for the basement rocks, we would expect to find a layer of sediment over the top of the basement rocks. That would just be normal. That doesn't demand billions of years of evolution. We would expect some erosion from that second day when we start seeing the rotation of the Earth. So God said, let there be an expanse. He made the expanse. He called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. The third day is an extraordinarily momentous day. The Bible says it this way, and God said, Vayomer Elohim, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. Okay, here's a volcano out in the middle of the ocean. The original dry land may have looked something like this. The fact is, we don't know exactly. There are several ways that land can appear above the sea. One way is for cracks to appear in the Earth's crust and volcanic activity to build mountains out in the Earth. That actually takes some time. Another way would be for an imbalance in the weight of the water in the Earth's oceans to push some parts down and others up. Or it may have been a purely miraculous event. At any rate, God said, let there be dry land. And he said, we're going to gather the water into one place and let the dry land appear. And so there is all over the world, all over the globe at the same time, a rising up and a dropping down of the crust underneath the earth. When we study the lowest levels of the earth's available crust, when we go looking at the basement rock under roughly a mile to 2 miles of sediment, we find broken, even fractured, tortured rock. This is not the result of a judgment, because there were no people at this time. But the earth itself was broken and twisted and moved. And at that time, there was some sedimentary rock, but not a great deal. And this movement caused an enormous amount of water runoff and erosion. Valleys, rivers were formed all in one day, relatively soft rock being bent and twisted into new forms and moved up and above the water. Water would have run off, and having run off, it would have sloshed back up again. And the Coriolis cycle caused by the rotation of the Earth, would have caused the tides up and down and over and through whatever was coming up out of the water. So a tremendous amount of erosion. We would expect to find the damage or the results of that movement in a careful look at the layers of the Earth's crust. Later on, when we get to Genesis 6 and we start talking about the flood, I'll show you some pictures from the Grand Canyon here in the U.S. And we'll look at how those layers actually work. See if the day 3 event can possibly be found. Years ago, Donna and I were walking on a beach not too far from our house, one of the lakes near here with our granddaughter, and ran into a little girl, probably about 4, walking along the edge there, and she had picked up a little rock. Now she came over to me for an explanation. Everybody thinks that grandpas know everything. She brought me this little rock, and it's just a little piece of granite, very common in this part of the country. And so I picked up that little granite, and I told her, "Did you know this is God's rock? He made this on the first day of creation. That rock right there, and it's been laying there in the lake all this time just so you could have it." I told her nothing but the plain, unvarnished truth. That is, in fact, God's rock. And he made it just for her to pick up. That's its purpose in life, as a reminder of the creation. So, day 3, and dry land appears. And there was a gathering together. God saw that it was good. This is the first time that God says that it was good. And then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit after their kind with seed in them." And it was so. Now, that explains all kinds of things. So the plants yielding seed allows for the propagation of plant life. Grass goes to seed at the end of its season, and those seeds plant the next season of grass. Trees grow up out of the ground and bear fruit that has seeds in them, and those seeds fall to the ground and new trees come up. The growing thing, the first generation of growing things were the result of an immediate miracle by God himself. But he designed those plants to be self-propagating. So there could be another generation of apple trees and wheat fields and everything else. God looked over and said, just for the fun of it, I'm going to put a mango tree over there. Because he knew someday, thousands of years later, somebody would be interested in mangoes. there it would be. And it makes good juice. It's good to eat. You could put them in a salad. Yeah. And God did that on the 3rd day. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seeds after their kind, trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. The term "after their kind" reminds us of what modern scientists call species. The kind isn't quite the same as a species. Modern scientists have some more sophisticated ways of calculating what a species is, but in general, a kind is a group of individual plants, or later on organisms, living things that can propagate. So if you want your apples to develop, they have to have pollen from a different apple tree. Okay, some trees can be pollinated from one blossom to another, but most trees require pollination from a different tree. And you can pollinate from any of a variety of different kinds of apple trees, and everything works just fine. But you can't use the pollen from an apple tree to propagate an orange grove. It doesn't work. The genetics are different. God put different codes, genetic codes, into each kind so that there could be no cross pollination of different kinds. We can, we can dream about that sort of thing, but it will never happen that an orange tree will begin growing watermelons or cherries or chipmunks or anything else. It's always going to be oranges, some kind of oranges. They may not be as good as somebody else's oranges, but it will always be the same thing. So the kinds are actually very good. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, there was morning. That was the third day. On the fourth day, God begins to fill the emptiness. He's given it form in days 1, 2, and 3. And on the fourth day, he begins to fill the emptiness of the earth and of the universe. I like this photograph of a bald eagle grabbing a fish. There on the fourth day, we see stuff filling the heavens and the earth. So birds in the air and fish in the sea, and the birds eat the fish, and mostly the fish eat one another. It's kind of fun. And so God looked at this and he said, "Let there be lights." It's going to start off with the sun and the moon, and later on the stars. Okay, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate day from night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And there's the suggestion that the sun and the moon would be a good way to tell how long the day is. So you watch the sun in the sky. There's a sunset. You just count until the next sunset. Oh, well, that works out to, and you could call it whatever you'd like, but we call it 24 hours. Uh, that's actually conventional. We could call it 72 oolongs. You don't have to call it hours, but by convention, we all know what we're talking about when we talk about 24 hours. And we measure the 24 hours by how long it takes for the Earth to rotate on its axis, not for the sun to rise and set and rise again. The same is true with the moon. How long does it take the moon to go across the sky and come back to the same place? Well, we discover that that takes around 28 days. The word month comes from the word moon. So we have the day, and we have the month, more or less, a lunar month. And then we have the year. How long does it take the Earth to go around the sun? And we notice that by the angle of the sun in the sky. How high does the sun get above the horizon every day? And it comes to the top and then it goes in the other direction. It goes lower in the sky, then it comes back up again. You measure that cycle and it comes out to around 365 days. This text tells us that God built those relationships purposely. This is meant to be. It's exactly the way he wanted it. They separate the day from the night and the signs for seasons and for days and for years. How can you tell that it's getting to be fall? Well, that harvest moon sets in the sky. Why is that? Because that's the way it works. The moon is just rising at the time the sun is setting. It doesn't happen at other times of year. And then God placed them in the expanse to give light on the earth, to govern the day and night, and separate light from darkness. God saw that it was good. Now, notice that in this fourth day, the light bearers are created. All the stars and uh, the planets, all of this is happening here. Oh, I've got a bird and fish in the next one. Bird and fish don't get here. This is the sun and the moon and the stars. None of that existed prior to that. There was light in the universe before the sun and the stars were created. Let that sink in for a bit. Because when John tells us that God is light and in him is no darkness at all, we can understand where the light comes from. And, we've got another problem with the length of time that it would take the light to get to the Earth from the various stars. The fact is the light was already on the Earth, but then the light was, we could say it was created en route, but it really wasn't. The light was filling the universe until some of it was coalesced into stars. Okay, I'm going to do one more day, and then next week we're going to come up with the sixth day. One more day, the birds and the fish. The birds. This is an eagle. I like eagles because they're just fun. Uh, they're big and they're mean, and he's grabbing a trout out of a mountain lake. That's a great big nice fish. And God created the birds on this fifth day. When the birds were created, there's all different kinds of birds. And the one thing that almost all the birds have in common is that they can fly. Flight is a remarkable thing. I'm a pilot, and I learned how to fly, and I can fly a little small plane. And I can fly it fairly well. I can land it without ruining the airplane. And that was actually hard to learn. There's a lot to know about flying. Birds are born, they punch their way out of the egg knowing how to fly. God built that into them. The flight muscles, the nature of a bird's lungs, the control system, the brain, nerve, feather control system in a bird is uniquely complex. There is nothing like it in all the rest of nature. The bird's flight controls are absolutely astounding, and he does it all with a tiny little brain. He knows exactly what to do with each muscle and literally each feather, and he can adjust it all to get precisely the performance that he needs. Birds are absolutely amazing. And God says concerning sparrows, are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Now, I don't know who buys sparrows. I don't. But, sparrows are as cheap as they come. And yet a sparrow, teeny little off the shelf bird, can fly. He can fly from the beginning. And his flight control system is controlled by an internal onboard computer more complex than the most complicated starship. Uh, just do the math. Look at the evidence. Birds are remarkable. They're all different, and yet they can all fly. Their wings come in all different kinds of shapes, and they use a variety of different mechanisms. But each of those mechanisms is uniquely designed for the specific bird. All of this together was created at once. God put the fish in the sea. already knowing how to swim. Now, I had to learn how to swim. I remember that when I was a little kid. Our mom took us to the local public pool, and we learned how to swim in this pool full of chlorine and all kinds of other little kids. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I'm glad I learned how to swim, but I had to learn. Fish, no. Fish are different from birds in that the fish is designed to live underwater. He has a different system for taking oxygen into his system than the bird does. They're quite different. And yet God created them on the same day, and fish are put there to be food for eagles. Other little living things were placed there in the water for the fish to eat. And birds eat other things on land. It gets more and more complicated, and yet all of it is at its base very simple. When we get to the sixth day, as the last day of creation, and we're primarily going to see land animals, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth, each of them after their kind. And all of the genetic principles are in place. Now we've got birds and fish, we've got mammals, we've got lizards and creeping things. There are going to be elephants and kangaroos and mosquitoes and gnats and trout and everything on the earth by the end of the sixth day. The direct implication of the scripture is that all of this took place very quickly. I don't feel like I have to insist on each day being precisely 24 hours long, although that's what the text implies. I don't think that's the key to it, but it's a very short time. God could have done all of this in an eye blink. He required no time at all. He gave us the time as a pattern for our lives, not for his. And so we're going to stop right there. I'll continue in the sixth day with the creation of man next week. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody there. Okay. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate everybody coming out and you give up your Wednesday evening. Oh, look at who all's here. I see Pastor Joel there. Amen. And Palermo, greetings, as Roger, and I see, yeah, Alex is there. Good. June, yeah. Hey, wonderful to see everybody. I'm going to unmute everybody. Donna had to go and help son-in-law Mark with his choir, so she can't say bye-bye. And Oscar is in Philadelphia or somewhere back in Pennsylvania. I don't see Oscar here. Okay, they're off busy. I know that Mama Norma has been having some trouble, so I hope that this doesn't mean that we're having some troubles. But anyway, we'll see you all again. Thank you all for coming. This has been this, as always, is special. Here, okay, we should be unmutable. Bye bye, everybody. Love y'all. See you next week.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr.
Jan.
Jan.
Ciao, ciao.
That's it.
Roger. Bye bye, guys.